Can't hear you.
Sitting here with my mute button on, like a goblin. I hope you enjoyed our Stranger Things style music, flying through space.
It was great, flying in over the cloud tops.
Very relaxing. I feel like the Demogorgon's going to come attack us any second now, though.
Well, vampires can't fly, right?
Vampire, well, no, that's not true. It depends on the mythology. I think there's lots of vampires who can fly.
That's true.
Some of them turn into bats. Other ones can just fly around like Superman. It's a lot of liberties taken with my favorite monster. That's for sure.
Well, you should write your own mythology then. Decide which one you want to go with.
Oh, there we go. Vampire coming soon. Hello, welcome to the show. Hello, everyone who is tuning in to watch. We appreciate you joining. As a reminder, if you want to ask us questions, just type it into chat. We can see questions from LinkedIn and from YouTube, but we can only reply to the ones on YouTube. So if you're on LinkedIn and wondering why we're not typing back to you, that's why. You can blame LinkedIn and send in a petition or something crazy like that. Today we have Linda Bready, who has saved my bacon many times in the past, especially one time maybe we'll talk about, but we're going to find out. But Linda, why don't you introduce yourself to everybody?
Oh gosh. I've been around for a long time in the industry. Do you hear that echo?
No, it's fine.
Okay, great. Well, I've been in the industry for a long time. As you know, I ran Be Ready Outsourcing for years before it was acquired by Investment. And then stayed at Investment, went on to Folio Dynamics, decided to go back to consulting, which is what I really love to do. And now I'm working fractionally for a fintech firm here in Charlotte. And the book came out last year, and now I'm on a podcast with you.
The book.
Yay.
The Exit Equation. There you are. So if anyone wants to read about M&A, here you go. We can talk more about that if you like. But as you know, the format of this show is I don't know the topic beforehand. You come in and talk about whatever you want to talk about. So what do you want to talk about?
Well, I was actually going to start talking about, I was trying to remember how long we've known each other.
It sounds like there is a little bit of echo, but I don't know what to do about it. So we're just going to have to live with it.
Okay.
It'll be just fine. We'll be all right. So I think it was 2010, maybe. Could have been earlier than that.
I think it was earlier than that because you guys were already working with Be Ready before Investment acquired us, and that was 2010.
Okay, so it must have been like 2009. I know I started in 2007, so it was after that,
right?
By a little bit. So sometime either like 2008, 2009, kind of in the depth of the chaos. Yeah, you saved my bacon. So that was exciting stuff.
That was what we were there to do. So it was all good.
It's true. So for those listening here, you can know what I mean by Linda saving my bacon. We were running Portfolio Center, and to you kids today, that's like it's like Orion before Orion.
Yeah.
And Portfolio Center was Schwab's technology for doing performance reporting. We were running that, and back in those days, we had these things called servers that we put our software on, and that ran the servers. Servers were made out of computer equipment that you had to put together physically. You didn't just, press a button and it was all running. And so we outsourced all this server management to this woman, and she worked on her own, and she managed our Portfolio Center and the servers and the whole thing. And she died suddenly.
Very tragic.
Just very tragic. She was really well known in the industry, kind of beloved, and was kind of this, workhorse who could just do anything, and just suddenly passed away. And that was it. We didn't know how to access the servers. We didn't know how to do anything because she just did everything. And I luckily, I don't even know how I found you, if it was a referral or if I just started Googling or whatever. But I found Linda at Be Ready, and she got my entire Portfolio Center migrated onto new servers into a way that was accessible over a weekend. And so back on Monday, we were back up and running, and our clients could actually get their data. Now, of course, in those days, there was no like electronic portals, so no one actually noticed because it was all just about getting that stuff created for the quarterly paper reports that you had to stuff your own envelopes, if you can believe it.
Oh, yeah.
I know anyone under 40 right now is like, what are you talking about?
And why would you do that, right?
Why would you have everyone in your office sit around a table for 2 days stuffing envelopes? Yeah, it was pretty amazing. But yes, did something that no one thought was possible. I talked to many other people and they were like, yeah, I don't even know if we can help you. And Linda said, not only can I help you, I can knock this out in like faster than it's possible to do it. I don't know what kind of weird time stop mechanics you had in your firm at the time, but
it was magic and no sleep.
Magic and no sleep. That is that sounds just like a description of my college experience.
Well, there you go. There you go.
And it wasn't because I had too much homework.
Well,
yeah, so that was amazing. That was back in the day when you were managing technology and portfolio center for everybody.
Yeah. Lots and lots. There were it grew. It surprised me the way it grew, right? I mean, I think about RIA firms too. Think about RIAs who go into business because they want to help their friends and family, and all of a sudden, poof, there's a business there, right? And by the time you guys came on board, I had 18 people working for me, and 15 of them were the breadwinners for their family, right? And it's crazy.
Yeah.
But it was a blast. I'd do it again.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you got acquired by Envestnet, who brought all your people into their fold, and then kicked off your the next phase of your career.
Yeah. Though I do have
thank you for saving me. I really appreciate it.
Well, that's
almost
what we
20 years
for.
later,
Yeah, that's what we were there for.
Yeah,
no, it was the time at Envestnet and even Folio Dynamics was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. It let me talk to people in other parts of the industry, realizing that the RIA sales guys would go sell, and I can't do that, so I don't want to, and all of those things. But by the time I was done with that, I was really happy to be back and consulting again and just working with advisors to solve the problems that they're facing as they hit them.
Well, let's talk about a few of those problems, maybe. You want to talk about some of those problems? What are some of the weirdest things that are going on right now that you want to share about?
Well, there's one that I spend a lot of time on, especially now, which is RIAs have these good firms. They're growing. They keep adding people. They keep doing more. They add new tech, and they're finding as they hit certain points in their travels that the structure of the business isn't really keeping up underneath, right? You get to a point where you think it's a capacity problem, and it isn't really capacity. Maybe it's the fact that the firm is not moving work through the firm the way the workflow ought to be. Everything's still old, or maybe that it's not a tech problem. Maybe they're not utilizing the tech the way they should. And I find it bubbles to the top when RIAs are in the midst of some sort of pressure, whether it's a sudden growth spurt, or there's a transaction, or they're suddenly thinking about succession. And I'm like, I was thinking about that this weekend, and I'm like, I wonder when JD sees that sort of stuff, because you have to see that.
Oh, that's all of them. It's funny, when I start a new consulting engagement, those people who read the last page of a mystery novel first, right? I think about that a lot when I'm dealing with advisors, and I ask them to talk about the last chapter in my first meeting. So what is it? Essentially, the question is, who's going to own your shares when you don't?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember, and maybe I've had one person give me a solid answer. Everyone else is like, I don't know. Like, that's why I'm calling you. But I contrast that as I think about if I were consulting with tech companies in Silicon Valley, right? And I ask them, what's your end game, right? What's the last chapter of your story at this company? Who's going to be next? And they're going to say something like, well, I think in April 2026, Google's going to give us an LOI, but then I'm probably going to get another one from Meta. And then I'm going to, I'm going to sell only when I get to 100 million. You know what I mean? Like, they have this so specific answer for that, that it's just known, right? None of these people started their company not having any idea what the end game was. Right. Now they may not get that, right? They may change their mind halfway through, but starting it up, they know what they want. They're not just like, you know what, I think I'm going to start a company. Nah. I mean, I'm sure there are some, but the prevalence of that on kind of a typical company standpoint is pretty unbelievable compared to I think it's probably most professional services, but I think these investment firms or the advisory firms in particular, they just don't know. Like, I don't know, I'm having fun. Maybe I'll work forever. I'm like, you're not a vampire, right?
Right.
I joke about this, but that's not a real thing. You aren't going to live forever. Someone's going to own this, and they just usually don't have an answer. And about half the time I can get them to an answer, and half the time I can't. Right? They're just not even willing to commit to this idea that they might not own their shares forever. I mean, they recognize it rationally, but they don't recognize it kind of outside of that. And it's pretty interesting. And I talk about three. I said you can do it the easy way, the lucrative way, or the really, really hard way. Right? The easy way is decide you want to go get acquired. Pick who in advance. You say, oh, I want to get acquired by Brighton Jones. Right. And so you just copy Brighton Jones's service model, pricing, investment portfolios, service model. Just make yourself look like a mini Brighton Jones. And then when you're done, just call Brighton Jones and say, hey, I think I want you to buy me. And they're going to look at you and it's going to be like, okay, you look just like this is easy. Right. And I've known you for 20 years because you've been interacting with them that whole time, kind of building that flow. That's kind of the Silicon Valley way, right? If you want to get bought by Google, there's a path to that.
Right.
The lucrative way is get to about 4 million in revenue, or maybe a million, somewhere between 1 and 8 million, right? Pick your poison, 1, 4, or 8, right? You get to that size and then intentionally stop. Mm-hmm. This is the one that people can't even wrap their heads around, and most people can't actually do it successfully, right? Because it involves changing the nature of the way they think about their business. And so it's too hard to switch from growth will solve my problems to I have to solve all my problems. But you'll make more money that way than almost any other way, right? Because you can get to 50, 60% margins no matter what the size of your firm is if you're not trying to grow. Yeah. And so you get to 4 million and just make $2 million a year for the next 20 years. Yeah. Great. Keep it rolling. You don't need to grow past that if you don't want to. At the end, maybe you can sell your company for parts. Basically, you won't get a huge valuation because you had no growth, and nobody wants that. But you'll get something. Hey, who cares? Because you made $2 million a year for 20 years. Like, really?
Exactly.
If you spent all that, you're a bad financial planner for yourself.
Certainly get the wrong business.
Yeah, and then the really, really, really hard way is to do the thing that everyone says they want but don't actually, and that's to create a true multi-generational firm where you sell internally to your next generation. And ultimately, you take a big hit on valuation and a big hit on cash flow in order to do that. It's a great legacy play, but I would say 75% of the people who try and do that fail.
Yeah, I don't disagree at all. And I think it's fascinating because I find there are people who are in their sweet spot and they decide, to your point, they grow intentionally to a point and then they're good, or they want to leave this legacy. But their legacy has changed over time. And I've seen firms where, the advisor gets mad at their BD and decides to form their own BD. And then they get mad about something else and they form another supplemental company to take care of something. So by the time they get ready to exit their business, they go to their second generation that's in-house, and it's a strong bench, but they never asked them, do they want to run a service company? Because now that's what they're doing. If they're their own BD and they're doing these other services that you have then outsourced to other advisors, your second generation has to be ready to do that.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating to see the number of people who's believe that they have a good second generation in place, and how often that mismatch means that the second generation steps away. I don't know if there's an easy way to fix that or not.
I mean, honestly, I think the easy way to fix that is know what you want, prepare for it for a long time, and, be really good to your people. And that's, it sounds like kind of golden rule level advice, but like, that's kind of it, right? At the end of the day, you just don't make big promises and then keep them. And then your people won't ever leave like that.
Yeah, that's true. It's interesting though, because I was talking to a couple of firms about 4 or 5 weeks ago, that small firms, but 3 or 4 partners. And they're all, yes, we know exactly what we want and we're completely aligned. And then you sit down and you talk to them and you realize that they all may want to grow to a certain size. But all 3 of them have different ideas on how to get there. And there isn't any alignment. And they've never had that conversation. I mean, I think getting partners to really, and leadership to sit down and really have those conversations is eye-opening for those firms. I'll bet you run into that a fair amount.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that's going to sink your firm is when not all of the partners agree with the same vision.
Mm-hmm.
And the biggest conflict that I've seen usually comes around when you think about that last chapter and how it's written, and people want different things. When you have the founder who wants to create this lasting legacy, but you have other partners who are like, no, we just want high cash flow. We already have enough. Like, we just want to like milk this thing for cash. And so they're in this, like, we got to grow so that people can afford to buy in. And another population of partners is like, no, we want to just kind of grow slow and milk the cash flow. Why are we reinvesting everything when we already have enough money? And I'm like, well, you do, but the next people below you don't. And neither of those is the wrong answer. But when you have both of it in the same firm, it's a recipe for splitting the firm and just not having those people together in the same place, right? Someone who wants to go to a beach holiday in Hawaii and another one who wants to go tour museums in Paris can't be on the same vacation. Just doesn't work.
Right. I mean, the number of teams who think they're aligned, but the only thing that's different is they haven't hit a conflict yet.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Totally. That's telling for me. And
everyone's aligned until, someone gets cancer. You know what I mean? And then it's like, oh no, we got to do something. And then all the cracks will start showing.
Right. And I think about the best way to get people to sit down and have these conversations. And it is like herding cats sometimes, because they just,
well, and you have to get people who are willing to tell the truth.
That's right.
And that's not always possible.
True statement.
They don't even tell you. They're just like, well, this is what they're going to want to hear so that I don't lose my job. Right?
Right. Still, it's fascinating, right? I mean, if you think about, why do you think in any services, and I'm not talking about just RIAs, but why do you think it's so difficult for the leadership to actually put themselves back into the place that their second generation or even their operators or service people are, to remember what that was like, so that they can then have a reasonable conversation about how to grow the firm and leave that internal legacy or succession?
They can't remember what it was like because they were never there. The entrepreneur founders will never have the perspective of the person who grew up in their firm, and vice versa, right? There's an unbridgeable divide from the perspective of the people who, when they wanted to create a future for themselves, they went out and took the risk and made $20,000 the first year. Right. And then they grew it and they hustled. And I mean, we've seen the beginnings of firms before, and it is just pushing something uphill until you get that rock to the top, and then everything kind of starts working. But before that, it's literally just like pure effort. And the second generation just never doesn't have that mentality, nor do they have that experience, having gone in and said, okay, I might not make it. They got a job, they got paid a salary, and they were brought up and mentored. And I'm not saying either of those paths are better or worse, right? I think a lot of founders are like, they'll never see it my way, and my way was blah. You know what I mean? But
yeah.
I'm not saying that their way's better or that they deserve something for having gone through that. I'm saying that you can't come from a place of you can come from a place of empathy, but you can't come from a place of understanding, right? Mm-hmm. You have to come from a place of care, where instead of saying, well, I remember what it was like, so then I can respect their perspective, you have to come in from a place of, I don't understand their perspective, just like I don't understand my teenage kid's perspective. You know what I mean? You're like, that's not my generation. I didn't grow up like you did. I didn't grow up post 9/11 and post, quarantine and all this stuff. I was already cooked by them. They grew up in a very different time, in a different way. And the same is true for a Gen 2 versus a Gen 1, right? The same thing happens when I deal with multi-generational firms where there's a third and fourth generation. The same generational divide happens between Gen 2 and Gen 3, and then Gen 3 and Gen 4. Everyone's looking up and they're like, well, I'm never going to have that. And they're right. The receptionists at Microsoft don't drive Ferraris anymore, but they did in the 80s, right? Because that's just the nature of what happened at that company at that time. And so it really has to be a place of, I want to take care of my people, both on every generation. Generation 2 looking at Gen 1 and at Gen 3 and saying, hey, we need to both, mentor up and help them on their journey, and mentor down and help them on their journey. And then everyone's helping everybody on the journey, and everyone plays their role, and everybody's doing well. And when people come in from that sense of like, I'm a servant to this organization, and they make the mental shift that I think you need to make it around 4 million of revenue in your firm, maybe 8 million of revenue, sometime in that window. You have to shift your mentality from, this business is here to serve me and serve my lifestyle, to one that is, I am here to serve this company. And if you can make that shift, then you'll be one of the firms that does really well and survives and thrives and grows past that 8 million. And if you don't make that shift, you're not going to.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's interesting because while you were talking, I thought of two different things. One is when I was at the NAPFA Large Firm Forum in February, which was great. Puerto Rico was wonderful, and it rained for 4 days. So we never got outside, not much anyway. But there was one of the speakers, and I've forgotten her name, but she talked about multi-generational communication. And she was talking about working with the different generations within a firm, right? From the founder, who might be a boomer or a millennial or an X or whatever. And she anchored it with certain things that they grew up with, right? In the 70s, it was still vinyl, phones on the wall, and you had to go find a phone, or you had to go home if you had to get a message to your parents, that sort of thing, right? And then 80s music becomes portable, and the 90s, there's a change, and now we have a digital native generation that never had life without a microwave or certain things. I mean, I think about my son who cooks. He lived overseas for school for 3 years, had a kitchen in his dorm suite, and he cooked his own meals, but the majority of them were cooked in a microwave, right? So it's fascinating. And when I talk to advisors, I think understanding those generational milestones or anchor points would help them have their conversations across their firm.
Yep. Yeah, they're difficult conversations
Yeah.
because people have different goals and different perspectives, and sometimes it's hard to respect that other perspective, and doesn't always go well. Realistically, it just doesn't. There's I'm a big proponent of making space for people who are coming up. That it's not about when you want to leave your seat, it's about when it's time for someone else to take it. And even if you don't want to leave that seat, it's important that you make space for people to move into that seat, or you're going to be in that seat forever. And you take off hats when other people are ready to wear them, not when you're ready to not wear them. And that's a hard lesson for a lot of people to learn who wore a lot of hats for a long time. And a lot of people just philosophically don't agree with that, which is also fine. That's not like I'm always right. I mean, most of the time. But and I've made space many, many times in my career that I wasn't ready to give up.
Oh, yeah.
It was time for them. And so I stepped aside, and sometimes it went really well and it was really gratifying, and other times it was horrible. And I, regretted and resented it on some level. And those people who probably aren't listening, but if they were listening, that they're like, oh, they clearly resented making space for me because it didn't go well. I don't. Right. And sometimes when they're like, oh, it went really well. And those are sometimes the ones I resent and regret. So it's not always about the outcome. It's about oh, yeah, man, I had more to do there. You know what I mean? From my own perspective. But I never regret or resent the philosophy of making space for those people. Right. I would do it again. Right. I might do it again differently, but I would do it again. Because I firmly believe that you always need to make the space and that you sacrifice your own desire for someone else's growth. I'm a big proponent of.
Well, I find it's, as entrepreneurs build their own firms, and if they build multiple firms, you find that you start to think about, at what point can I give up my seat so that I can go on and do the next thing that interests me? I mean, I couldn't still be doing what I was doing at Be Ready. I'd have lost my mind, right?
Sure.
I mean,
yeah,
so you've got to find that rhythm. And a lot of times it's interesting because I think about businesses and their growth, and sometimes, like we said at the beginning, they're just adding people or technology to help the growth proceed. And a lot of times, I don't think it should be about building something more complex, right? It's about getting clarity on how your business runs. And a lot of times I find that firms are able to strip back some of that complex technology or processes. And you're not, so I was going to say, I'm sure you see that a great deal.
Yeah, well, it's always a great choice. It's funny because I'm sure you get this all the time when people come to you and ask about process. They're like, we need to put in some process to make us more efficient. I'm like, well, process isn't designed to make you more efficient. Process is designed to make you less efficient. Process is designed to make you more consistent.
Right.
And so if you, by putting in a process and everybody follows it, suddenly feel like you're totally inefficient, then your problem is in your service model, right? Not in the fact that you don't have a consistent process. You want a really efficient firm, just let everybody do it their own way as quickly as possible. It'll get done fastest. It'll be a nightmare. Right.
Yeah.
And
not repeatable at all.
Not repeatable at all. And you're going to have scaling issues for sure at times. But from a client service standpoint, that's kind of the best client service. As long as all your people are good enough. Right. You got a bunch of, if everyone in your company, Superman and Wonder Woman and Aquaman, and they all can just go and do their own thing and solve the problem by themselves, great. Send them to do it.
Yeah.
Easy peasy. Right.
Yeah.
Clients delightedly happy. But you don't get brand power. You don't get a repeatable process. It's hard to make promises. You're just selling people's personalities and trust, and you don't actually create anything of actual real value for the long term. Right, in the short term, you have great value that you're offering and selling out, but it's more of a time-based thing than something you've created, where those systems you create start eventually to be able to get more efficient. Not on the advisor side, but always on the operational side.
Yeah. Well, I see firms that have ended up building that way without meaning to. And then they're at a point where the founder says, oh, I'm going to sell my company. And they're flabbergasted that people pass.
Right. Yeah, they're like, this isn't, you're going to go away and then your whole staff is just going to wander off. You didn't create a real organization. You just created a team.
Yeah.
Right. Which is totally cool, but teams disband very quickly.
Yeah. I mean, somebody might buy the book to have a book, but
sure.
But
you can get good value out of it, whether or not you create something, repeatable and systems based and that sort of thing. You don't have to create a $7 billion firm with its own identity in order to have a good kind of exit from your business.
Sure.
You can have a good exit even if you are just selling your clients for the value of the client itself, and that's the only value you're getting. You're still getting a pretty decent price. This business is so lucrative, right, that it still creates value even if you really don't do it right.
Well, what do you think it looks like when a firm has set it up right?
So many different ways. It's funny because there isn't a right answer. But here we can brainstorm. We'll just each give one back and forth for a bunch of things, like the green flags that we see on a firm. You know what I mean? So you have these comedians that do the red flags or whatever. We're gonna do green flags. We're gonna say like, what are some of those signs that you see when the firms are running really, really well? I usually see one of the first things is the founders are very concerned about making sure they can get equity into their people's hands, because there is more demand to buy than there is supply to sell, right? Everyone wants in and nobody wants out. Those are very big green flags. If I see that, I'm like, oh, I can solve a lot of problems for you. And I can see where they're coming from, because they're coming from this, like, I want in energy. And people are pretty good at kind of seeing what's good for them for the most part, professionally, at least, not always personally. But even those ones who aren't so good at picking situations for themselves personally are pretty good from a professional standpoint of knowing ultimately what will be lucrative, especially advisors.
Sure.
So that's a green flag. It's a green flag for you.
Knowing that someone can take their vacation and have it be a vacation, and know that when they come back, it's not a fire drill. And that's whether it's the founder or an ops person, right? Because to me, that means, okay, you've spent the time in entrusting your staff to make decisions for you if you're the founder, so that they can proceed while you're gone, if it's business as usual. Of course, if there's something out of the ordinary, it's the founder's going to get a call. Okay. But also at the staff level, whether it's service or ops or whatever, nobody's hoarding tribal knowledge, that they have spent enough time understanding how the business runs that they can make it work if somebody's out on vacation for a week, even if there are a few things that get pushed to the side that get dealt with when the person comes back, right? I mean, that's normal. But somebody can take a vacation and disconnect. That's a green flag for me. That's a big one.
It's a good one. Another interesting green flag that I just thought about, and this one's going to be controversial, but I think firms that share their full financials with their whole staff, and that's a rare one. I don't see it a lot, but I do see it. I see it on the top line.
Yeah.
Right. But when they share not the full, like every detail, but at least revenue and profitability, I think that's a huge green flag for me. And it's one of the things that gives me a real bit of strong evidence that their partner program is going to work. Because if they're willing to share that information long before people become partners, I think they end up at a very different kind of corporate culture once someone is thinking about becoming a partner. And it builds demand for partnership. The people who resist it, when I talk to them, are like, yeah, but like, doesn't that create problems? Because now everyone's, knowing how much money I make, basically. And I'm like, maybe, but if it does, that's the earliest lesson you can get that someone's bad for your organization.
Right.
And also a bunch of people looking and saying, wow, this company makes a lot of money, I want to own it. That's the general reaction for the right kind of new partner. Right. You don't want that person who's coming in like, you're making too much money, oh my God, you're horrible. Right. You don't want them as your partner. You want the person who's like, wow, you're making a lot of money, can I do that too? Like, I want in, can I get in? And then if you let them in, they're like, oh my God, I got in, this is great. And then they help you grow the firm because now they own a piece of it.
Yep. And let's face it, if you know what the book is and you know approximately what the fees are these days, I can make a pretty good ballpark about what everybody makes.
Within 10%.
When I was running Be Ready, I knew what all of y'all made.
Yeah, of course you do, because it's the same everywhere. It's not complicated, right? There's not some weird secret sauce in professional services. It just works the way it works, and that's just the way it works.
Exactly.
I do see some firms every now and again that are very different, right? And I'm like, well, okay, let me learn from you. This is going to be interesting. But 80% of the time, they're on the standard mark-to-version income statement.
Yep.
Right? Revenue, 50% for staff, 20 to 25% for operations, 25 to 30% profit. Done. That's your income statement for 80% of firms out there.
Right.
So like, everyone already knows, so why not show that you can be generous and share it?
Right.
All right, there's my green flag. You got any more?
I do, and mine is actually kind of related to yours, but it's not so much about the numbers, in that it's a green flag for me when your founder or your partners, they'll sit down and they'll have strategy meetings and they'll decide the direction that they want the business to go and the steps that they want to do. The green flag for me is when once they have an idea of what they want to do, that they'll bring in their staff, at a minimum, the second generation, right? The next generation leadership. But if they'll bring in their whole staff and say, hey guys, this is the plan. This is a roadmap that we came up with. This is where we're going. We think this is the right direction. Do you see any issues, problems, or things that we haven't thought of? Because then you get buy-in at every level of the firm. And the receptionist, or the person who, runs the mail, or whatever, even the smallest job feels like they are part of the whole, and that's valuable.
Very good. Yeah, completely agree.
Speaking of Mark Tvergerin, before you do your next green flag, if you have another one, you were there at the T3, right? When we were in California, and we all went, Marianne, Mark, weren't you with us that night? We all went out to dinner. He got the big car, and I'm trying to think where we drove. Was it was it California? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think so. This doesn't sound familiar.
I thought you were there. But I literally this morning was just thinking about Mark, and I'm like, oh, I haven't talked to him in a long time. I'll need to send him a message.
Neither. It's been a long, long time.
Yeah. Any other green flags?
Let's see. Other green flags. Well, this isn't a green flag for what makes a good firm, but it definitely makes a green flag for if they're going to be my client. I know it's going to be much easier for me if they have their core values posted on their website, and none of the core values are things like integrity or accountability. The things that I call the table stakes core values, where like, if you don't have that, you should shut down.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, oh, you have integrity. Well, congratulations. So does every good financial advisor. Now, and just because you put it on your website doesn't mean you have it.
Right.
So like a really good set of kind of cultural core values that are rich and feel unique to that firm. Those are pretty good. That's a green flag for me that person's gonna get me, because I'm a big proponent of that, and I used it very very much in my practice. And when I talk to firms, I'm like, you hire and fire based on core values only, right? You train and support around productivity,
Right.
but you don't fire for a lack of productivity, because you can fix anyone's productivity.
Oh, yeah.
But if there's a core values breach and they just aren't going to ever get that core value down, they got to go. I don't care how productive they are.
The basics are, I had a friend of mine who was getting ready to take the Series 7. I'm like, understand the basics. They're like, really? Don't lie, cheat, or steal.
That's it.
Period. That's it. It's not hard. It's not rocket science.
Totally.
Yeah.
I think core values is good when it's not that kind of basics, when it's something that if someone had the opposite core value for their firm, that it's completely valid and a positive for that firm, just not yours, right?
Makes sense.
And so that's a big one.
Yeah. One of my other big green flags is not necessarily thinking about they'll be a good client for me like yours, but it's when I get the calls from people who want to talk to me about their problems and what's going on, and they talk about how they've already tried to figure some things out, right? What resources they've talked to, have they joined a study group, have they reached out to a mentor or even a business peer who's gone through the same thing? Are they still, it sounds stupid, but do they enjoy educating themselves? And I'm not talking about the obligatory compliance and stuff that you have to do every year. It's, are you still actively learning? And it doesn't even have to be about your business. Are you actively engaging your brain in a way that is not only about your business? That I find to be incredibly helpful, because they seem to be the most open to me saying, we're going to take everything you thought you knew and we're going to put it over here on the side, and we're going to try things that don't even make sense to you, but we're still going to try them. And they're like, okay, let's try it. So
I have a good one. When a advisor, like the founder of the firm and the owners of the firm, all have their own financial planners outside the firm.
Yes.
Right. Huge green flag. I think it's really rare, actually. Weirdly, you'd think that people would understand the value. Just like every therapist I know has a therapist.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know any therapists who don't have their own therapist. Right. But it's remarkably rare to find financial advisors who have their own financial advisor who they pay.
Well, I talk about that a little bit in the book, in terms of when they're thinking about, it's time to think about succession or M&A for their business. Advisors spend their entire career telling their clients they need to plan and think about things, and the last chapter, right? And all of those things. And so many advisors don't go through that process for themselves. And to your point, I think having an external advisor, whether it's just a financial advisor or whomever else, I think that's critical.
Oh, absolutely. I had a founder who we were looking to sell the firm, and he was looking to retire. And I said, so what's your process going to be like? What's going to happen? Right? What do you want? He said, yeah, I think, I'm going to retire down, I'll start working 3 days a week. And then, eventually I'll go down to 2 or 1, but, I just want to keep my hand in. I want the clients to feel really good. And I'm like, you know what? Do you have a financial planner? He said, no, I've always just done it for myself. I'm like, okay, cool. You got to go talk to this guy, registered life planner. Go just do 1 session, and then you can always hire him later if you want. But just go get a life plan. Comes back and it's like, okay, what are your plans for retirement now? He's like, well, I'm starting this cooking school, and I'm gonna, get on my bike at least like 100 miles a week, and it was like a transformation of his thinking about his life, and it made the process of retiring much better. because ultimately it's not like your staff really wants you to hang out and be the, guy in the corner office who doesn't actually doing anything at that point, right? You're just kind of getting in the way of the process working right, because you're not actually necessary anymore, which is hard for people to accept, especially entrepreneurs. The fact that they're no longer necessary is this huge thing. So I always know walking into a situation where someone's like, yeah, I have my financial planner, I need to sell my company, I need to make at least this much money, and then my needs are met. And anything extra beyond that is gravy. So get it, I'm happy to have more money, but this is my bare minimum. I walk into that kind of situation, it's going to be an easy one.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one other big thing for me is the leadership team. I've run into several firms recently where they can't even be civil, let alone be friends, right? So that's a red flag for me.
Huge. Yeah.
But the green flag for me is when the teams make an effort to, maybe socialize might be the wrong word, but no, that's the right word, socialize and be interested in each other's lives, even if you're not big best friends. That doesn't matter. But you do have to be civil, and you do have to be in tune enough with the person that you're in a partnership with that you understand that what happens should be for the best of both of you and not just for one or the other. So that's an amber to red flag when it doesn't, when you walk into the wrong situation. But when you see the firms that are, they've been buddies for a long time, or they play soccer on the weekends or whatever, it just makes all those difficult conversations when you go in and you say, look, this is what we need to do to make sure you're in a place where you want to be able to sell your firm in a year. These are the conversations and these are the decisions that we have to be made. If you have people who are friendly with each other, that's just so much easier to do.
Yeah, so much easier. Yeah, that's definitely a big one. I got one for you. When this is just a weird little green flag, but it's one that I feel like is very telling. When the entry-level job descriptions are actually entry-level and don't include 1 to 3 years experience. I think one of the biggest, it'd be a red flag, but one of the biggest things that concerns me when talking to any advisory firm about hiring, when they say, I just need to find someone who can come in and hit the ground running. It's like, oh no, I wish you had talked to me a year before, because it's clearly you just didn't do the prep work or didn't do any of the work, or you just aren't interested in mentoring and training, right? Which is very, which is definitely a big issue there.
Yeah, no, I have to agree with that, because I talk to advisors who are, I've sent some, late last year, I know I sent some your way too, where they're like, I need to hire, or I'm now looking. But you go look at the entry-level jobs, and it's not just for in this business, right?
Oh yeah.
I mean, my son is a game developer. He's a software developer, right? He is being displaced by AI. Luckily, he's a smart kid and he knows how to use AI to his advantage. And he actually, I don't think I told you, he just got engaged by someone who is building a game or wants to build a game. And so they've turned over the prototype and everything to him to build. And so he's having a blast, which is great. Amazing. But, he graduated a couple of years ago. And as you go through those entry-level jobs, they all want 3 to 5 years experience. A real entry level might say 1 to 3, but they call you out because you don't have that, and it's entry. This happened in the 90s, right? If you remember, there was a period of about 4 or 5 years where all the entry-level jobs were asking for experience, and it finally died down. I'm just waiting for it to die down again.
Yeah.
But it's when that happens, to your point, hit the ground running. Well, they can't. You are setting them up to fail because one, They might know how to manage money, or they might know how to run this piece of software that you're hiring them for, or answer the phone that you're asking them to be service on, or they can interact with Schwab, but they don't know your firm. They don't know your processes. And if your onboarding isn't set up in a way to help them succeed, you have failed. They didn't fail, you did.
Right. Yeah.
So,
Oh, absolutely. It's a huge, huge problem. And sometimes it's just more about the mentality of the owners than it is, something else. They're like, well, I don't know how to train anyone. I don't know how to do all that stuff. It's like, well, then go for my lucrative way, right? Where you don't have to train people. You just stop growing and kind of handle your stuff and make a bunch of money and don't reinvest for that growth. You don't need to grow. But if you want to grow, but you don't want to mentor people and train people,
how do you do that?
There's no, that's the whole point, this is the point of your career to give back. So huge green flag is when people are, ready to go and we're going to hire, I could hire anyone. Because quite honestly, someone coming in with experience in this industry isn't true of every industry, but it's true in the professions generally. If someone's leaving, there's a reason.
Yep.
People don't leave this industry randomly, just like you don't change banks on a whim because it's a giant pain in the ass.
Yeah.
Right. It's not a simple matter of when I was in accounting, you just left your accounting job, got a new accounting job, and then you were fine. You just keep working. Right. And nothing's different. Right. Other than the people sitting next to you. But not here. It's just not the same. And so to leave, that level of pain is so high that something happened. Now, it's not always that person's fault, and I'm not saying that everyone with experience is a bad hire. It's obviously not true. But you want to understand what actually happened.
Yeah.
And imagine you have a 2-year training program for a new associate advisor. If you hire an experienced advisor, you're going to have about a year of deprogramming and then a year of programming. It's going to take the same amount of time. It's just that you spent twice as much money during that time. And at the end, the experienced hire can probably manage more clients than the new person. But you've paid for that big time, and you still don't get the benefits for 2 years, no matter what.
Right.
So that's a big green flag for me.
Well, and that feeds into a green flag for me too, is the firms that have a good system for handling confrontation and when things blow up, right? To your point, people don't leave their jobs in this industry on a whim. They've lost faith in the firm or the progress or the direction or something. And that didn't happen today. That happened over time. So a firm that I go into that has a strong enough process to be able to recognize when people are starting to struggle, whether they've been elevated too far, too fast, or maybe they're just not the right fit, or maybe something else is going on, but that they have a way to bring those conversations up in a way that is not confrontational and isn't angry to start with, right? I mean, if it turns out that the person is just bad, right? Lie, cheat, and steal. Let's think about that. Then you're allowed to be angry and deal with that, right? But for Joe Kidd that gets his job and he comes in, whether he's a junior advisor or an ops person or whatever, they don't suddenly start to deliver less on a whim. Something has happened. Something's changed. And so the firms that have a process to identify that, that's a big green flag for me.
Yeah, definitely. All right, I'm tired of green flags.
Yeah, that was good. I mean, we hit some good ones.
We definitely hit some good ones.
Yeah.
Do you have any opposite red flags you want to get in trouble about?
Can I say when the founder's an ass?
You can say whatever you want. Yeah, no, that's always a problem.
Yeah, I mean, and it doesn't have to be just the founder. It could be anybody in the firm. When there's I used to work for a firm years ago who shall remain nameless. This was a long time ago, though. And ops person there was your typical Southern Belle, queen bee, stereotypical. And if you ticked her off, you were in hell forever. It was awful.
Yeah, that sounds horrible.
And so watching out for those types of behaviors and figuring out how to train them out, right? That's a big red flag for me.
Yeah.
People.
I wouldn't call it a red flag, but it's definitely a yellow flag it's a caution flag for me when a firm is using EOS.
Yeah.
I like the book Traction. I think there's a lot of really good stuff in it. A lot of my core values work comes straight out of Traction. There's a lot of stuff I do and I love from Traction. The EOS structure, especially the like visionary integrator structure, man, there's nothing more in business that has the risk of creating toxicity more than that. It's like the opposite of making space for me, right? It just creates this mentality of like, let me carve out all the crap work and make someone else do it. Is definitely a cautionary tale. There are some great firms that run EOS. I'm not saying that if you run EOS, you're bad, but I'm saying that EOS has the potential to break your firm.
Yeah. I actually 100% agree, and we'll probably get into trouble for that. But to your point, there are some firms that use EOS and they're great, and others that don't. But it's fascinating because I have people who call me and say, hey, I want to work with you. What do? Do you use the EOS system? Do you do this? You do that? And I'm like, no. I mean, yes, there's parts of EOS and Traction that are naturally part of what I do, but I work with advisors based on what I think they need, right? And it's communication and it's explanation and it's understanding. If I put it in a formula, for me, I can't do it. First of all, I do not thrive if I have a weekly formula to deliver. I will lose my mind. Now, do I talk to my clients on a weekly basis? Most times. In fact, I have a couple of them that I talk to probably every day. They'll call me and ask me something, which is totally fine. But I'm not trying to check off boxes in some system because that'll drive me crazy.
Yeah, I think the biggest response to that's going to be, no, we implemented EOS and everything got way better.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, so you started having weekly structured conversations and your life got better?
Interesting how that happened.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter what the structure is. You just started getting together on a regular and consistent basis to make sure that you're all aligned. Yeah, of course that's going to make your world better. And EOS enforces that. And so, yeah, you're going to be better when you implemented EOS.
Yeah.
But oh boy, that system that was designed for like manufacturing and distribution companies being applied to professional services has some kinks that you need to work out. And I will say that there's a lot of EOS implementers that have no experience in professional services, and they get hired by professional services firms to come in and implement EOS for them. It's like, yeah, doesn't work.
It's not the same.
A unique kind of business model. So yeah.
It doesn't matter which of the professional services it is, right? I mean, the product is the service. It is not the tire or the bottle on the shelf. And that means that because it's the service, every advisor changes their approach to their clients based on who the client is. They may think, because they have their, I've run into the firms where they have all their clients in the same models or whatever because it fits, and they are working with people, 401ks, or they're working with people 55 to 60 or whatever. They've got their sweet spot, and they've got everybody in there, and it's all structured to be efficient. But to your point much earlier, it's really structured to be consistent, because you can't tell me that those advisors have the same approach to every single client. They just don't. They can't.
No, your advisor is going to break the rules 100% of the time. Not every time, but most of the time. And if it comes down to process or client, they're always going to choose the client.
Yeah.
It's the nature of a profession. It's what you want. If you don't have your advisors breaking the rules, then your firm's built wrong. Honestly, is my opinion.
Absolutely.
I'm sure lots of people would disagree with that too, but like, you got to give those advisors freedom to execute on their judgment correctly.
Absolutely. The most successful transactions I see for advisors, and we all know how many mergers and acquisitions go badly, right? Don't get their value. I think the number's now up to between 85 and 90% of them. But the ones that are happiest are the ones who have sat down and said, what matters to me is what happens to my clients. Yes, I need to make money. That's a given. But the number of advisors who I've seen go through the process and decide over on buyer B instead of buyer A, even though A would have given them more money and other things, because B was a better match for their clients, right? They had the same feel and structure, and that it's not the same as if you're trying to sell tires. It just isn't.
Yeah, no, absolutely. 100%.
Yeah.
100%. There was, I learned this term from Spencer Siegel, and I was watching him speak at a conference. He was talking about process. He said the most important thing in a process is to recognize where the process isn't automatable and you need to include a human interface. And the whole room's like, what's a human interface? And he's like, it's just a person that moves things from one place to another because it's not part of the system that you can use. And especially when you have someone like a high-end professional who's just unwilling to follow the process, right? This is the classic, hey, I need my emails printed out kind of person, or no, I'm just going to do it this way and I don't care. And they come home with $1 million in new revenue. So you don't care.
That's right.
You're just like, okay, whatever. That sounds great. Go find more money and we'll figure it out. Because you don't want to stop them from doing it their way because their way is effective, but it breaks your firm at the same time. So you put in a human interface to take all the stuff from that person, package it all, and put it correctly into your systems. And there are firms that I've talked to about this concept, because it's really valuable, that feel like that is a moral failing. That
so
someone
funny.
not following the rules is somehow making the world worse for everyone. Because then, oh no, well, if they don't follow the rules, then other people are going to want to not follow the rules. And then I tell them, like, well, are those people bringing in $1 million of revenue? Because if they are, then you should let them break the rules too.
Exactly.
And hire them in human interface to get the stuff into your operational system so it can be efficient. Like, why would you want to cut off something of value for some, like, you know, preconceived notion of the way things should be and how everyone has to follow every rule in every process? It's obviously can't be the case. And if you're doing it that way, it ultimately breaks what's good and valuable about your firm.
Completely agree. I literally was working with a client last fall who one of the partners just wouldn't use the CRM that everybody else used, right? And they were going crazy because they couldn't schedule meetings. You know, it was all up in the air. And I'm like, look at what his revenue is that he brings in. I think he was bringing in $1.5 million every year, like this. And I'm like, dude, you have somebody here who's on flex time, who I have spoken to, who would like a full-time job. Have her take care of this and be the person who takes his stuff and marries it to the corporate stuff so that everybody knows where they are. They did it. They're happy as clams. Now, the other two partners are like, well, why does he get that? And I'm like, are you bringing in $1.5 million like this?
Yeah.
And
do you need it? Or are you putting information in the CRM just fine?
Exactly.
And instead, you want your consolation to be that you have an easier time taking vacation, or you get the better parking spot, or you get whatever perk trading that you want to do.
That's right.
What do you want?
That's right. Have somebody bring you a milkshake on Friday afternoons. It doesn't matter what it is, as long as you continue to grow the firm the way that you want to grow it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, there's another green flag for you. I know I said I was bored of them, but there's another one. It's when everyone's focused on what they need and what they want, as opposed to what everyone else is getting.
Oh, yeah.
A firm where it is worried about what that person gets as opposed to me, I know it's doomed, right?
Yeah.
But if they're like, I just need this and I can get my job done, I don't care what everybody else is getting, right? I mean, there's a fundamental kind of moral failure and unfairness in an organization. That's different, right? If they're not really thinking about, you know, how do we make a fair environment for everyone to be able to succeed well, right? Through nepotism or through favoritism or through whatever, that's different. But, aside from that, just if everyone gets what they need as opposed to everyone getting the same thing, then I think everything works better.
Yeah, because literally, even at Be Ready back in the day, I had somebody who was your stereotypical grinder, right? She would come in, I would give her a stack off my desk, and she made it go away. She came to me maybe once or twice with a question, but at the end of the day, it was all done. I didn't have to look at it. It was right. It was wonderful. She came to me one day, said, I'm having trouble with this thing. And we talked about it. And I said, well, what would solve it for you? And she's like, well, my schedule's now all out of whack because it was all about kids and delivery. And I'm like, you want to come in earlier? You want to come in later? Pick whatever you want. And she's like, well, it changes. And I'm like, as long as you tell me which day you're going to be late and which one you're going to be early, I'm good. Happy as a clam, And it didn't take a lot. It just took listening to what she needed.
Yep, absolutely. Everyone has their things that they need to be the most successful. So just give it to them. So simple. Make it. I've heard before, the complaint, well, then everyone becomes an exception.
How does that make them an exception?
So what if everyone's an exception?
Okay.
Just what if? Who cares?
I was going to say, okay. And?
Yeah. So now they're all exceptions. Awesome.
Yeah. I mean, process and workflow. You want to have fewer exceptions because it takes more time. And that can be bad. It isn't always bad, but it can be bad. But for the people and how they are interacting with the firm, as long as the jobs are getting done, the clients are happy, everybody else is happy, and the revenues are coming in, who cares?
Make everyone an exception. Give everyone just what they need. Uniquely.
Earth-shatteringly simple.
Or just let them do it the way that they need to do it. You know what I mean? You just don't even have to give it to them. Just don't stop them from doing the thing where they're like, they just leave at 3 and you're like, just don't even mention it. You don't have to make this, everything doesn't have to be a big deal. You can people know what they need to be successful. Everyone knows. If I had this, then I think I could totally nail everything. So just let them do it.
Yeah.
We're not a monolith and everybody's different. So it's okay to have that individuality.
Though it's interesting, what do you do when you run into those clients and firms that come to you and say, well, we've set it up so all our people do X, Y, and Z, and they're, and they really are really regimented. What do you do with those? I mean, you are the least regimented person I know.
I was going to say, I don't think, if those people get past a 30-minute prospect call with me and decide they want to work with me, I would be shocked. I don't have any of those clients. I have people who are at various levels of that, but on that end of the spectrum, they just aren't going to. They aren't even going to call me. Let's be real. They've seen my videos. They know what they're going to get from me. I call myself a wizard on LinkedIn. I'm not getting those people calling me thinking I'd be the right fit for them. You know what I mean? It just doesn't happen.
That's right.
If someone calls me and says, "Hey, I think you might be helpful," or gets referred to me, it's usually because they're my kind of people. Because anyone who's going to refer, you wouldn't refer one of those firms to me. You know what I mean? You'd be like, no. "Oh no, don't send them to JD. Everyone's going to lose their mind."
Yeah. So I don't take those clients. I have more tolerance for that than you probably do, but my tolerance is still pretty low. But you are not. I have 3 people I would refer those people to, and you are not one of them.
Yeah. I mean, those firms are great. I just don't think they're going to like me. I don't think a regimented firm is bad. You know what I mean?
No,
I think
they can be
it's
very
a great
successful.
home for a bunch of people. And if people are bucking against that structure, fire them that day, because they're not going to work. Focus on the people that really, really thrive on structure. And then everybody's happy.
Yeah. it's interesting because as I'm talking to firms, when they right now when people are calling me, they're it's usually around M&A in some way, shape, or form, or it's a growth inflection point or a strategy inflection point.
Yeah.
And they say, well, we're not all pulling the same direction. We're all off in our own little worlds. And I'm like, well, is that necessarily bad for what you're trying to do? Where
Right.
are you trying to go? And then we figure out if we need to corral the horses or if we can just let them run.
Yeah. It's totally okay to not all be carrying the same vision and to treat yourself like an ensemble. Are you going to get to 20 million of revenue doing that? Probably
No.
not. Right. Like, I mean, maybe, but probably not.
And
Right.
and was that your goal? I mean,
Well,
it
that's the
depends
big
on
thing,
what
right?
your goal is.
Yeah. Yeah. And most advisory firm owners don't know or care. Right.
Those are
It's like, how
those are
big do you
my
want to be in
first
10
meetings.
years? I don't know. Like, okay, well, do you want to pick a number? I use the vacation analogy with my clients. I said, if you were planning a vacation for your family and everyone just said, let's go on a vacation, and that's the most anyone's willing to say, you're not going to go very far.
Right.
You need to decide, hey, we're going to go to Europe and we're going to visit at least 3 countries. And these are the countries we think we want to visit. You could probably have a pretty decent vacation with even just that level of direction.
Yep.
You don't need to know what museums you're going to go see on Saturday, right? You can play that one by ear. If you're not a planner, you don't have to plan that far, but you have to plan enough to get your plane tickets and your hotel rooms. And guess what? You could get to the first country and you start exploring around and you can totally change your mind. You can pivot and decide, you know what, we're going to Italy because that's way cooler because of Brexit. I don't know, right? You're like, oh, look, we heard about a festival. I did that one time. We ended up in Amsterdam on a vacation. We were going to go to Paris and then Amsterdam and then London. Sorry, we're going to go to Amsterdam, then up to Scotland for a festival and then down to London. And we got to Amsterdam and it was the last Queen's Day. Queen's Day is like the big one. And this was the year that the Queen was abdicating so that her son would take over the throne. So it'd be King's Day after that. This is the last one. And so we found one apartment in all of Amsterdam that was available at that time. And we didn't even know what was going on. We're just like, oh, we found this one. And it was outside the red light district. It was not, as it turns out, outside. And we were traveling with like our, kids from age like 7 to 14. You know what I mean?
That's awesome.
It was we got there and we're like bar next door, the whole place smelled like smoke. We're just like, we gotta go. So we're like, cancel that Scotland festival, we're gonna go to Bristol for this other festival for May Day, which sounds way cooler. And so we just changed all our plans because it just wasn't working. And we had a great time. I mean, I didn't because I got food poisoning, but everybody else had a great time in Bristol. And it was the right choice, but we never would have gotten anywhere if we didn't have that guiding North Star of what we were going to do initially.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, that's why we plan, so that you can point. We plan so that the leader can point.
Right.
And that's it. Because otherwise everyone just starts milling about.
Oh, now all I see are the me's from the old Wii. They would mill.
Yeah, just milling about, bump into each other. Yep, that's what happens when no one has direction. And it's the CEO's job to provide that direction and say, we're going that way. And then later, if we realize that that's not the right way, they go, we were going that way, we're going that way.
Yeah, changing isn't hard, but you have to have a starting place and a place that you think you are going to. It's so often I have to have those conversations. I have those first with people, right? Why are you running into this problem now? What are you trying to do? What are you trying to accomplish? Which always leads us to when are you going to exit your business? How are you going to do it? How do you want to do it? All of those things, right?
Yep, absolutely. Because if you don't know in advance, it's going to be uncomfortable when you get there.
Yeah. Well, and the number of times that I've talked to somebody and they're like, well, I'll take care of it next year, right? Well, the next year, health scare, right? whatever. And then the transaction that they could have planned for becomes an emergency,
Yep.
or at least has urgency. And so they invariably leave something on the table, whether it's money or something that they wanted to do or whatever. And then they end up exiting the business unhappy. And that's so awful.
Yep. It is very unfortunate. And it's a little tricky these days, I have to say, because the valuations are so high.
Yeah.
Right? They're too high to make rational decisions on some level. That everyone is either accepting or reacting to these valuations, not really thinking about their plan. You know,
Right.
a lot of people ask me, they're like, should I just sell now? You know, because we all know this isn't going to last forever. You know, you don't have these valuations. There's a cycle, right? We saw it before with the big banks in like 2006. You know what I mean?
Yep.
We saw it with, with the kind of big initial roll up structures, you know, in that, you know, kind of 2007 and 2011 basically, or whatever. And those were really big, you know, so it's like, we've seen these cycles where you get these crazy valuations for a while and they go away. It will happen, right?
Oh,
it could
yeah.
be 10 years from now. It could be tomorrow. I don't know. Nobody can know, but everyone knows it and they can smell it. And they're like, oh, should I just sell now while the valuations are high? And it's like, well, no, you shouldn't just do anything because of valuations.
Right.
You shouldn't. And you also, if you're thinking about selling, you shouldn't not sell just because you've heard something bad about private equity, right? Like, okay, well, who cares, right? Like, find a good one then. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, find someone who you vibe with. I know lots of great firms with great private equity partners that aren't ripping their firm apart.
I
right?
do too.
I also know firms that did get their firms kind of ripped apart and have to deal with dumb, stupid stuff now that they got bought. And they're like, oh, I'm not allowed to pay for my people's parking anymore because corporate structure said no. Like, what? Obviously you made a, you know, not a bad choice, but one that you're going to have to live with. And other ones I know, they're like, oh yeah, they're on our board. We talk to them once a year and as long as they get their coupons, they don't care.
Yeah.
Which is sometimes a healthy way and sometimes a not healthy way, but you just want to, you know, find the good match regardless of valuations. Just so hard to do when it's so high because the money does call to you, you know?
Yeah, it does. I mean, you know, if you're saying, well, it's the valuation's high, should I sell? It's like, well, have you accomplished what you wanted to accomplish? If you sold today, would it really give you the money you want and the outcome that you want for your firm, right? If you were going to sell it and you found whoever you were going to sell it to, 6 months from now, what are you going to be doing? A year from now, what do you think you're going to be doing? And do you have a direction, whether it's starting another firm? Because let's face it, if you sell your firm, somebody's going to tell you you can't start a new one for a while. Right?
For sure, yeah. And why would you want to anyway?
That's a given, right?
Like, I want to stop doing the easy part of owning an advisory firm and go back to when it was really hard.
Yes.
Like, who wants that?
Yeah, nobody wants that. But anyway, so I mean, it's crazy, right? But I talk to guys that are like, you know, I think I'm going to go ahead and sell. And I'm like, well, then you need to make sure you have your ducks in a row. You need to make sure that you've given thought about where it is you want to go and what you want to do. And you need to make sure that your firm is ready. Because just because you're ready to sell your firm doesn't mean your firm is ready by any stretch. So.
Yep. Well, also, like, you know, I mentioned that earlier, that kind of, you know, somewhere between that 4 to 8 million, if you want to keep growing your firm, you need to make that mental shift of this firm serves me into I serve this firm. Right. And if you don't make that shift, you'll stop growing. But also, like, as you're thinking about selling your firm, if you have any interest in your firm and you have made that, if you have made that mental shift, you're thinking not what's right for me, what will I be doing in a year, what's the right thing here. You're thinking what's right for this firm.
Right.
As someone who is leading this firm, as someone who is coming in from a fiduciary standpoint, thinking about what's right for the firm itself, right? Not for the people in it, not for the clients, not for the owners, but for the actual entity. What actually creates the best outcome for it? And sometimes I think about advisory firms a lot like pirate ships. I know this sounds a little weird, but
That's a great analogy, but
there's
okay.
a lot of similarities between, kind of old school pirates and the way advisory firms work. In fact, the compensation plan I like best is one that is entirely and explicitly based on how a pirate ship runs.
Okay, I want to hear this.
Right, we'll get to that one. But so I think about this, and it's like, you are a small firm. Let's say you're 4 million of revenue, and you're cruising around, taking over little merchant ships and taking their stuff and selling them over on Tortuga, having a great time. And then you realize that you're never going to be able to really get the big score, right? You're never going to be able to get some of those big things. So you're like, I'm going to join this fleet over here because it's a little dangerous being on my own, right? My crew seems like they're a little disappointed. They want to grow a little bit more than I want to. I'm kind of cool cruising around, but like, this ship longevity is going to slow down, and I'm going to get kicked off at some point here because that's how pirate ship work. And so they say, hey, I want to join your fleet of pirate ships. And then you join their fleet. Now you have a little bit less freedom, but also you have complete safety, right? Because no one's able to come at you anymore. And you know that if you want to take on a bigger ship, no problem. Just bring on a couple of the fleet members. And so you create this, much larger community. And so as I'm thinking about, the owner's mentality of those smaller firms, it's like, okay, well, are you and your crew and the ship itself going to be better off on your own, taking the small prizes, or are you going to be better off being part of a large organization that can take on the British Royal Navy? You know what I mean? So like, what's really right for everybody?
Right.
And after they kind of look at me funny, right? And they're like, why are we talking about pirates? They kind of like, but yeah, that's kind of really it, isn't it? You know what I mean? Like, do I want to be the, little ship, or do I want to be part of a big thing?
Sure.
And once I am free of having to be the one person at the top, do I get to explore and, work on a different ship, or do a different role, or not be a pirate anymore, or maybe be the successor to the big pirate, or maybe just, chill out and continue doing what you're doing and just not have to worry about all the really hard parts anymore. Let everyone hate someone else for a while, because leadership is very lonely.
Yes.
It's an interesting thing that, I think a lot of people don't really consider when they're that kind of pinnacle leader, they're the CEO of a firm. That is that lonely position. And when they join a larger organization, suddenly they're part of the crew now.
Mm-hmm.
They're no longer that pinnacle person. And it's not lonely anymore.
Right.
Because they have peers now in a way that they never had peers. And a 50-50 partnership or a 5-person partnership where everyone owns equally, it's not the same as having peers.
Right.
Right? You still can't bitch about the boss to your friends. Right? You're still there. And so it's something that not a lot of people consider in terms of joining a large organization, is they get to be part of the group again. And for some people, I think they really enjoy that, actually.
Yeah, I've talked to some advisors that they like that. And I just talked to a buddy of mine who merged with a larger firm late last year, I think it was. And he's suddenly realizing that it's hard for him to be in a group.
Yeah.
That was something that he thought that he wouldn't have trouble with. And it's causing him grief. I mean, we've talked about it, and I'm like, well, what you need to do is go and talk to people and see what you do about that. Is there a role that will allow you to stand aside or out a little bit differently so that you're not a peer, right?
Yeah.
So
that's an interesting, opposite of what I was just saying, because there are those people like, and I'm probably one of them, right? I don't, I like being part of a group, but like somehow I always end up being the daddy of the group. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. I do. I know exactly what you mean.
Yep. Everyone just kind of starts following you around. And you're like, but I don't want to be the one who's leading. Can someone else lead? They're like, no,
Well, I'm like, I don't want to make all the decisions. Too bad. I'm like, okay, fine.
Yeah. We'll just stand here and wait, and no one will make the decision then.
Yeah.
And I'm not constitutionally able to have a decision just not be made, right? To just sit
Yeah.
there in uncertainty. I can't sit there in uncertainty. I'll die,
Yeah.
right? And so I do it first.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
you have to. You have to. I do want to know about the pirate compensation.
Oh, I mean, it's fairly simple. So my favorite compensation structure is everyone gets paid some reasonable base, somewhere between 50 to 75% of their overall compensation, right? And you start thinking about the way pirate ships compensation works is by shares, right? Everyone gets a number of shares, right? You divide the number of shares up and then it gets passed around. Regular swabby crew person gets 1 share. Ship's boys get like a half share. The bosun gets like 3 shares. The first mate gets like 5 shares, and the captain gets like 10 shares. And that's just legislated and voted on. Pirate ships were 100% completely democratic, right? They whipped everybody, but like you also got to vote to kick the captain off, right?
Yeah.
If they vote to kick the captain off, bye captain, you're out.
Yep, he's
right?
gone.
New captain, right? There's no ownership. There's no ownership of a pirate ship, right? In reality, it was we vote and what we vote for goes. And compensation was purely based on results at different levels, getting paid a different amount. So the compensation I build for my clients, it's always a little different because everybody's different, but it basically is okay. And this is for advisors, right? On the operation side, it's harder. But for advisors, you rank order all the advisors. You have like 9 different levels, or 5 levels, or 16 levels, however many levels you want. Every level has a specific base and a specific percentage of revenue. And you move up a level, you get paid more. And there are checklists to move from one level to another. You know when you're ready to move to that level by when you finish all the things you need to get to that level. And so you create this algorithmic promotion and compensation scheme where you never, ever, 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 one time ever have to talk to someone about a raise. Because if they come in to say, hey, I need to make more money, and you're like, well, let me see your checklist. And they say, well, here it is. And like, well, there's 5 things unchecked off. They're like, I know. You're like, well, get them checked off, and then you'll get a promotion, and then you'll make more money. But we don't do raises. Everyone at the same level gets paid exactly the same. So you enforce fairness. You enforce basically everything. You still have unfairness potentially being easier on some people promoting versus others. But that's an easier problem to fix than unfairness in compensation.
It's interesting.
Because everyone knows who the level 2 and level 3 advisors are, right? Yeah. But in a compensation structure, people rarely know how much other people's compensation is, unless it's set up like mine.
Yeah. No,
and part of that amount you get is a percentage of revenue. So that quarter, if you get 2% of revenue, and we have revenue of $1 million, you get paid 20 grand.
Mm-hmm.
Simple. Very motivating.
Yeah. Well, and this also goes back to having communication that we were talking about in the beginning with the team, so that everybody understands the financials and everybody understands the strategy, so that there are no ugly questions, right? You know, and then you don't have to fight about, I need a raise, but no, I haven't done the performance or whatever.
Yep. At the end of the day, we're all just groups of people coming together to do a thing, and we're creating some treasure, and everyone gets allocated a portion of that treasure. There's only so much treasure to go around, and you need to make sure to allocate the treasure fairly if you want everyone to be happy. Yeah. It's that simple.
Yeah, it really is.
All just comes back to piracy.
And as it should.
Yeah. Well, when you look at the way pirate ships worked versus looking at the way like the East India Company worked, right? Pirates were actually much more egalitarian.
Oh yeah, they were. The British, right? The East India Company, and no.
It's crazy. Like that's the when you start comparing kind of, when people talk about criticisms of capitalism, it's like, well, yeah, because you're trying to concentrate returns and allocate more money to the capital providers. And look, we can all argue about who deserves more treasure.
Right.
But it's hard to argue that the treasure allocation should be that outsized. Right? And when you're in that situation, that difference between what people are paid at the low end and the high end is a huge indicator of who's going to be successful long term in terms of creating a multi-generational firm. I mean, we could probably do a study on it and just look at what that difference is from like a newly minted CFP. Like take training apprentice people out for a minute, right?
Okay.
So the person who is just got their CFP, just starting to work with clients versus the top paid person in the organization. The higher that multiple is, the less likely they're going to be to have a successful multi-generational firm, period.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I totally
and
agree.
It's not about how many people and the allocation across those levels. It's just about the distance.
I have a question. We haven't talked about this at all, but I have a question about CFPs because I find that I'm running into advisors who are working on their CFP. They're older. I mean, they've been in the business longer, right?
Yeah.
They've started to run a book of business, and they're 6, 7, 10 years in, and now they've decided they want to go get their CFP, which I find fascinating, right? I don't know why that is. Any ideas?
Why they're getting it late, or why? I mean, is the question why they're getting it now, or why didn't they get it before, or why bother now, or what's your confusion?
Well, it's kind of, for me, it's like I would have thought, and I haven't gone through the process myself, so I have no understanding of the difficulty or anything like that, other than people say it's bare. Is it? What am I trying to say? I just find it interesting. For example, I know a young advisor. He's 32, and he's been working in the business since he was 23, I think. And he's just finished his CFP. He started it a couple of years ago, I guess. And congratulations, it was great. I'm very proud of him, and he's wonderful. But I asked him, and he said that he just didn't think about getting it right away when he started because he had just finished all of the other education that he had to do. And I wondered if that was if that was the reason why people delay to get their CFP rather than just having it from the beginning.
I don't know. I don't know a lot of people who did it like that.
Okay.
So I'm not sure. I will say I think it's probably a net positive. And part of what I think may have happened in that situation, at least, is that the CFP has become more powerful.
Okay.
You know what I mean? It has become, like, compared to when I started versus now, like the cultural understanding of what a CFP is, way more people know what that is now than they did 20 years ago, certainly. And so someone 10 years ago is like, oh yeah, I could get that, but like, it doesn't really matter. 10 years later is like, oh yeah, it's a really big hole on my resume. I might as well just get it done.
You might as well go do it. Yeah. Okay.
I started to go get my CFP, and it's easier for me because I'm a CPA, but like, I took the capstone course, and then I just had to take the test, honestly, and then I would have had it. And I just never had time. You know what I mean? And I could do it now, but now I'm like, I didn't bother. I did recently go and become a professional fiduciary in California so that I can be a trustee on trusts and things like that. But that opened up something that it was like a license, right? I'm a big fan of getting licenses, but like certifications, I don't do them anymore for myself because I don't need to, but I can see why someone would. Sometimes just like, hey, I'm going to go do that because it'll be proof that I know what I'm talking about. So that it closes the question of why don't you have your CFP?
Oh, that makes sense. I was
probably that, but everyone's got their own reasons.
Yeah.
I talked to someone who is going to have a windfall and wants to go to law school in like her 40s. I'm like, are you nuts?
Wow.
Right? You're almost 50. You want to go to law school? That sounds horrible. Right? And then I start Googling about law schools, and I'm like, okay, if I were going to do it, I'd do this program, of course, because that's what I do. But I'm not going to law school. That would not work for me.
I'm not sure that you could sit through law school.
Yeah, I have to do one that lets me show up in class or not at my discretion.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No, I'm much more likely to go be some like pagan priest or something. You know what I mean? Than
not a vampire?
No, those aren't real.
Oh, sorry. Oh my gosh.
All right. Wow, it's already been an hour and a half, if you can believe it. What else do you want to talk about? or are we getting close to the end of our endurance?
I think I'm good. I think we talked about a lot of the things that I wanted to talk about. I love
Yeah,
talking to
no,
you. It's great.
absolutely. We talked about M&A, which is such a big thing up in our industry. We didn't get too deep into it, given
No.
you wrote a whole book on it. But if you want to know out there about it, you can just check this out, and then you'll know everything she has to say about M&A.
Wow. Thank you.
And talked about all these green flags of what makes firms good. All good stuff there. Any big takeaways from our conversation that?
Oh gosh. Yeah, I like. Yeah, I mean, you said a couple of things that really resonated with me. The code on the website, right? The ethics, integrity,
Oh, your core values.
core
Yeah.
values. Thank you. Couldn't think the word value for a moment. Senior
Yeah,
moment.
no, I know how it goes.
But that I hadn't really thought about it that way, and that does fit in with the way I think about firms when I meet them and approach them, and whether or not I'm willing to work with them. Right? I mean,
Yeah.
because as much as I would like to help everybody, there are some people that are just not going to be a good fit for me. So.
Yep. Yeah, the way Angie Herber has described this to me, because she's the one who kind of taught me about this whole core values thing when I was implementing it at my firm. She said, you have your list of core values across the top. You have your list of staff across the side, and you just do a little matrix, and every person gets a check on the core value, which means they meet it. They meet that core value. They get an X, which means they do not meet that core value. Or they get a check minus, which means they aren't doing it now, but we can get them there.
Right.
And you fire all your X's today.
Mm-hmm.
There's no fixing that.
No, there isn't.
It'll break your firm. So yeah, core values, big deal.
So yeah, no.
And people either believe that or they just don't. I've never met anyone who kind of likes that process. They're like, oh, I love it, or I'm never going to have this.
Right. Or, and there are the people, everybody that just gives lip service to it, right? They say they agree because they have to, so that they don't get fired.
Yeah, for sure. Or they just don't know kind of how to use it. It's tricky. It took me years to figure that out. It took me years to figure out what service model meant. It took me years to figure out how to actually use core values in a way that isn't just bullshit.
Right.
Right. And it's intense to use them correctly.
Yeah. And and thinking about staff, I mean, you can tell by, they may say yes or no, right, as to whether or not they follow it, but you can tell just by how they act on any given day.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's not, if your core values are written right, they can't be faked.
That's right. That's right.
Well, that's great. I love that. Well, thank you for coming on today. Well, I really appreciate it. It's so fun to hang out. And for those out there, if you get a chance to work with Linda, you absolutely should. She saved my bacon. And that's just who she is. So if you need someone to help you bury a body, I'm pretty sure she would be my first call.
I have a shovel.
All right. Thank you, Linda. I really appreciate it. And thank you to everyone who came in to watch. And goodbye, friends. Enjoy.
Thanks for having me.
Of course.